Okay, welcome to your second lesson within block one sequence. I'm going to share my screen. So today the title of your lesson is Predict and Check the Next Terms of a Sequence. So recall that in your previous lesson, you learned uh, to be able to describe and continue a sequence given diagrammatically. So you were working a lot with diagrams. So in today's lesson, you're going to focus on being able to predict the next term of a sequence and then check whether you're actually right. Okay. So what the lesson is going to emphasize is going to emphasize being able to stick to the rule. Now, take note of that new word I just mentioned, stick to the rule, which is what you were doing before to be able to describe the sequence. You are given the rule that generates the sequence. Okay, let's get ready to do some retrieval practice to get you thinking about what you learned before to see how much you recall. I'll give you 4 minutes to do this retrieval practice. I think we should make it 3 minutes. This shouldn't be up to 4 minutes for this exercise. Okay, in about a minute, we'll review your answers. Okay. So the first question asks how many terms are shown in the sequence. So I'm sure you haven't forgotten about what we call terms. Yeah. So terms refer to the position. So this is the first position. Okay. That's the first position. It depends. So that's the first position, second position, third position. So when they're asking you the term, so this is the first term, second term, third term. So you should remember this from our previous lesson. So there are three terms in this sequence. And then next we were asked how many circles are used in the third term of the sequence. So by now you should be able to know what the third term means. It means this one here, these circles. So there are 10 circles there. Okay. Next one, you're being asked to describe the sequence. Okay. Describe the sequence means say what is making the next items in the sequence or the next diagrams, what is going on. So you can clearly see that we're adding three circles each time. Next, you're being asked how many circles would be needed for the fourth term of the sequence. Well, if the third term is 10, and if we're adding three every time, then the number of circles that should be in the fourth term will be 13. Okay, let's do some learning. Okay, here you can clearly see that we have numbers 4, 7, and 10. Now, if I ask you, what do you think is going on here? What is going on here with the sequence? Okay. Here we need 4 lines to create the diagram. Here we need 7 lines. Okay. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we need 7 lines to create this diagram here. So you can clearly see that we're adding 3 every time. So if I were to ask you to predict the fourth term, you would say it's 13. I just need to add, I'm using adding 3 every time. So when you're giving diagrams that may look a little bit challenging to figure out just looking at it, count the number of lines or the items that make the diagram and then write a number out. Okay, that way you'll be able to predict the next terms in the sequence. So here you'll see that it's going to be 13. Okay, so you can see that. All right. So how many lines will be needed to draw the fifth term? Well, that shouldn't be difficult, right? If I ask you, you would say, well, if we're adding 3 every time, the fifth term is going to have to be 16 because 13 plus 3 is 16. So we're going to need 16 lines to make the fifth term. Okay. And then if I ask you the sixth term, you say, oh, I just need to add 3 more, and that will be 19. Okay. All right. So what we've learned so far is if you see shapes that you just can't figure out really easily just looking at it visual, just looking at it, you can just count the lines or the number of items that make the diagram, write the numbers out, and then do your prediction. Prediction means you're trying to say what you think will come next. Okay. All right. It's now time for you to have some practice. Okay, you've done a bit of learning, so have some practice. I'll give you about 5 minutes to complete this task. Okay, in 2 minutes, we'll be checking your answers. Okay, let's check our answer. So the first one, you were being asked how many circles will be in the next term. So the first thing you were asked, how many circles are in each term in the sequence. So you can clearly see that there are 1, 3, and 6 circles. So you can see it there. And then you're being asked how many circles will be in the next term. So for B, it's going to be 10, because you can see that every time we're adding an extra 1 to the sequence. So here we added 2, here we added 3. So the next time we're going to be adding 4. So if this is 6, the next one has to be 10. Yeah? And then you're asked to draw the next term to check your answer. So when you draw it, you'll see that there are actually 10 circles. All right. So remember, the title of this lesson is to predict the terms of a sequence and then check the answer to see whether your prediction is right. And to be able to do your prediction right, you need to use the skill which we learned in our first lesson, which is to be able to observe a sequence, describe the sequence properly, and then use what you've described the sequence correctly, use that idea to be able to predict what comes next. Okay, I'll give you the answers to mark the others quickly. So don't worry if you didn't get everything right. Okay. Maths is progressive. You always learn from your mistakes. Okay, let's move on. All right. Looking at these squares, you can see that that's one square. That's 5. Okay, you can see there are 5 squares. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then the other one, we have 9 squares. So, what do you think? How would you describe this sequence? I'll give you 30 seconds to have you think. Okay, I'm sure. Okay, I'm sure someone would be saying, okay, we're adding 4 every time. You're actually correct. Yeah, 4 squares are added each time. So 13 squares would be needed to make the fourth term. So if I ask you, okay, what would the fourth term be? This is the first term, that's the second term. Okay, this is the first term. So you should now know how to identify first term, second term. So that's the first term, that's the second term, first term, second term, that's the third term. Okay, so the fourth term will have to be 14 squares because we're adding 4 every time. 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 plus 4 is 9. 9 plus 4 is going to be 13. Okay, so the fourth term will have 13 squares. Okay, let's move on. Okay, uh, so imagine the third term. So imagine this young man says, oh, the third term uses 9 squares. So the sixth term will need 18 squares. Well, you can clearly see what he's trying to do there, saying, okay, 3 times 3 is 9, so 6 times 3 will be 18. Do you agree with Jack? Do you agree with Jack? Well, remember what we've learned, the skill we've learned so far. You identify the rule. So I've introduced a new word. You need to remember the word, or you describe the sequence, and then you use that description that you think is absolutely right to predict what comes next. And that is what you stick to. All right. So that's what we're going to use to check whether Jack is right, whether we're going to agree with Jack or not. So if we draw diagrams, okay, so we keep going. We say, okay, we just need to add 4. That's what we get. That's the fourth term. That's the fifth term. And that's the sixth term. Well, you can clearly see that if we count the squares, Jack is not correct. Because what do we have here? Okay, Jack says they're going to be 18. Remember, that's what Jack said. Jack said they're going to be 18 squares. But we know that we're adding 4 squares every time, and we've stuck to that description because we know it's absolutely right. So if we check, let's count together. That's my pen. Yeah, you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So Jack is not right. Yeah, Jack is incorrect. Okay. Eva says, so here is another sequence. We're giving some blocks of diagrams. Eva says it is impossible to draw the 6 terms of this sequence. Have you noticed what's actually going on with this sequence? Every time we're getting rid of this block here. So you can see here in this second term of the sequence, this block is no longer there, right? So the next one, it means that one will be gone. Yeah. So is Eva correct? Are we going to have a 6th term? All right. So remember what we said. When you do your prediction, you need to use diagrams to check your answer, to support your answer. Okay. So if we do that, you will see that if we get rid of that, that's what is left. We now have the 4th term. Now, if you think about it, Eva said it's impossible to draw the 6th term. We've only had the 4th term. I'm not sure we have any block anymore, because if we get rid of that, it means there is nothing for the 5th term. So we're not going to be able to draw the 6th term. Okay. So Eva is correct. So remember, you do your prediction and you use diagrams to support your answer to check that you're right. Okay. It's now time for you to have a go at questions 4 to 7. But first, you're going to do questions 4 and 5 in 3 minutes. Okay. So we'll do question 4 and 5 first in 3 minutes. And then after you've marked that, after we've discussed it, we're going to move on to question 6 and 7. 3 minutes. Okay, in about a minute, we'll be marking our work. Okay, let's check our answers. Okay, now the first question, question 4, you're being asked, Annie and Dexter are predicting the next term in this sequence. So you can see here we have 3 circles, here we have 6 circles. So Annie says 12 circles will be needed to make the next term. And then Dexter said 9 circles will be needed to make the next term. So explain why they could both be correct. Well, you can clearly see that if we doubled, okay, if we're adding, so you can clearly see that Annie is describing this sequence as adding 3 every time. Okay, Annie is describing this sequence as adding 3 every time. So if we're adding 3 every time, Annie would be right. Okay, because now sorry, if we're adding 3 every time, Dexter would be right because 6 plus 3 would be 9. Yeah, so if we're adding 3, that's 6 plus 3 would be 9. So Dexter would be right. But Annie is thinking about this sequence differently. Okay, Annie is thinking that this sequence is being doubled. Okay, so Annie is thinking, okay, we're going to be doubling it. So if we double 3, it's going to be 6. Yeah, so 3 times 2 is 6. If we double 6, 6 times 2 is 12. Okay, so they're both correct depending on how they're describing the sequence. Now, how many terms do you need to be given to be certain of what the next term is for the sequence? Well, the answer is you need 3 terms. because at the moment you can see that we can have either answer is correct. So, but if we have a definite third term, then we can say, oh, okay, we definitely add in 3. So if we had the sequence to be 3, 6, and 9, so if we had the sequence as 3, 6, and 9, we say, okay, Dexter is definitely right. But if we had the sequence as 3, 6, and 12, we can say, okay, Annie is definitely right. So we need 3 terms to be able to describe a sequence properly. Okay. All right. The next one is, let's put this one here. So the next one is uh, Dora is working out the number of squares in the 6th term of this sequence. Dora says there will be 14 squares in the 6th term because there are 7 squares in the 3rd diagram. To get the number of squares in the 6th diagram, you need to double 7. Is Dora correct? Now remember what we said. To do your prediction, you check what is really going on with the sequence. And then you draw a diagram to check your prediction. Okay, so I'm just going to provide the answer for this one so that you can mark your work. Okay, so Dora is not correct. In the 6th diagram, there will be 13 squares and not 14 squares. How do we know? We can see here we have 3 squares. Okay, we have 3 squares. Here we now have 5 squares. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 3 to 5, we've added 2. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've added 2 again. So remember what we said. You write the number out. If you can't visualize it, you write the number out. So here we have 3, here we have 5, and here we have 7. Okay, so first term, second term, third term, fourth term will be plus 2, which is 9. Fifth term will be 11 because 9 plus 2 is 11. And the sixth term will be 13 because 11 plus 2 is 13. So you can see why it's important to use the skill we have learned, which is you do your prediction based on how you have described the sequence properly, actually checking that your description is correct, which is a skill we learned in our first lesson. And then you can now use that prediction to draw your diagram to check that you actually did your prediction correctly. Okay, it's now time for you to answer question 6 and 7. Okay. All right. So question 6 and 7, you have, I'll give you 4 minutes on this one because this one has a bit of work to be done. Okay. 4 minutes. Okay, in about a minute, you'll be marking your work to check your answers. Okay, it's time for us to check our answers. Okay, so this question here, you were asked how many rectangles are in each term in this sequence. So you can see it's just one, two, and then three. Okay, and then you were asked how many rectangles will be needed in the 10th term. Of course, it will be 10 rectangles because the term corresponds to the number of rectangles. So first term has one rectangle, second term has two rectangles, third term has three rectangles. So that's an easy one. And then how many circles will be needed in the 10th term? So you just need to know that each, apart from the two rectangles in the ends, each of the rectangles have just four circles on them. Okay. All right. I'll just display the answer so that you can mark question 6 and then we'll discuss question 7. Okay. So these are the answers. You can mark your work now. Okay, for question 7, you can see that it is not possible to draw the sixth term of the sequence as there would be no more squares to reduce the vertical columns. What do we actually mean? Okay, if we go back to the question, you would see that here we're removing every time we're removing this. Okay, we're removing this. So every time that's gone, yeah, you see it's no longer there. The next time this is gone, you see it's no longer there. So we're going after the sixth term. So you can see that that's the first term, second term, third term. Yeah. So for the fourth term, okay, for the fourth term, you're going to have this one left. Okay. So by the time you draw the fifth term, this is not going to be there. You're just going to have this one. So you can see clearly, yeah, that you'll now have, just a minute, let's rub this off. Okay. You'll now have, yeah, you'll now have this. Yeah. So this is the fourth term. This is going to be the fifth term. So we're not going to have this left to be able to get rid. It's not there. So we won't be able to draw the sixth term of the sequence. Okay. All right. That brings us to the end of our lesson. So for your parents who would like to contact me, those are these is my contact detail. And then these are the details for whenever we have our free live lessons. Okay, for those who will be interested to take advantage of that session, but it's only for those who really need it for underperforming students. Okay, all right. We're going to finish here. Until next time, bye now.